As the ceasefire in Gaza enters its fourth day, the situation is escalating in the West Bank. Israel declared Operation Iron Wall in the West Bank to target the Jenin refugee camp. And today, 10 Palestinians were killed and over 100 were wounded in the continued terrorism of the Israeli forces inside of the Jenin refugee camp. However, this is still coming with resistance from the Palestinian side. The Palestinian resistance in the West Bank has not only been active, but has been escalating. Israel exists in general in the West Bank. The resistance managed to gain more weapons and add more power to target Israel. This operation isn't against the armed resistance movements inside of the West Bank. This operation is another justification to kill Palestinian people for nothing. This is a representation of the genuine state of Israel. It's an example of why Israel was founded: bloodlust, murder, genocide, and ethnic cleansing. The majority of the people who are targeted in the West Bank are not armed resistance movements and armed resistance fighters. They are normal people, people who live in their homes, who are faced with settlers burning their homes, stealing their crops, burning their crops, attacking them, harassing them, racially abusing them every single day with the support of the Israeli army, and in many cases side by side with the Israeli army. The West Bank is the ultimate representation of Israeli apartheid. Israeli squatters who behave like rabid dogs without a leash in the West Bank, they enjoy Israeli law, while the Palestinians in the West Bank, they live under military occupation. They live under martial law. In the West Bank, the representation of the actions that are coming from the settlers have been in many cases revealed to the world. Several years back, settlers in the West Bank killed Ali al-Dawabsha, an infant whose family's house was attacked, burnt, and they killed a little infant called Ali al-Dawabsha. Ali al-Dawabsha wasn't only killed, this little infant. These squatters in the West Bank, who like to call themselves settlers, they celebrated his killing in a wedding. This was the wedding, and that was in 2015. And these are the people who live in the West Bank, coming from all sorts of parts of the world, claiming this fairy tale of a right on the land, and even quoting verses from the Bible when they're celebrating the murder of a little infant. Here, they're seen celebrating his death in a wedding. This is Ali al-Dawabsha, who was murdered by these people. They had this attack, and they were quoting Psalms 104:21. The young lions roar after their prey and seek their food from God. They also quoted Judges 16:28. O God, that I may be this once avenged of the Philistines for my two eyes. These are the people who the Palestinians, the natives of the land, are dealing with. People coming from all across the world, criminals, pedophiles, rapists, having a safe haven with a country that protects them, protecting the criminals and allowing them to wreak havoc all across the West Bank. So it's not against the armed people who have more than one reason to resist Israel. It's against Palestinian people as a whole, the native people of the land, those who Israel does not even recognize. Now, despite all of that, there was a statement coming from the Hamas leader in the West Bank. His name is Zahir Jabarin. Zahir Jabarin made a statement concerning these actions in the West Bank in a recent interview that he had. He said, "We are facing an occupying and fascist regime that does not want to recognize the Palestinian nation and its rights. Our nation has steel will and sacrifice and has no option but to resist." He said that Netanyahu's goal is to kill and sabotage to continue to rule. Jabarin said Palestinians succeeded in defeating Israel in Gaza because they were united, and they will finally shatter the Israeli occupation through their unity, even if they're only fighting them with stones. This is clearly representing the will of the people in the West Bank and the fact that they will continue to fight this occupation, who they know very well since 1967, and even in some parts of the West Bank since 1948. However, the more concerning thing is the fact that there is a collaboration in this operation happening in the West Bank between Israel and the Palestinian Authority of the West Bank, run by the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas. It's well known that the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank has dealings with Israel. They have security ties with Israel. The Oslo Authority, named after the agreement that happened between the Palestinian Authority and Israel in 1993 in Oslo, they're made there to protect Israel. They justify Israeli aggression under the supposed peace talks between the Palestinian Authority and Israel in the West Bank primarily. The squatting establishment expanded from 100,000 to almost 1 million of settlers in the West Bank. They continued to steal lands. The Palestinians have checkpoints everywhere in the West Bank. A journey that can take them 15 minutes will take up to 5 and 6 hours, and sometimes they're banned from using certain roads. In many cases, that's very regular. Again, another implementation of apartheid and a clear representation of an apartheid. And the Palestinian Authority, they had a campaign against the Jenin Brigade of the Palestinian resistance that took place for over 40 days, up until things de-escalated following reconciliation attempts by certain figures in the Palestinian society. However, now Israel, they're revealing what the Palestinian Authority is doing. There was a report on one of the Israeli news outlets saying the planning, the coordination with Abu Mazen, and the goal to eliminate the battalions in what they call Judea and Samaria behind the operation in Jenin. And during this article, they're stating that the Palestinian Authority had this operation against the battalion and that they coordinated fully with Israel their withdrawal from certain parts for Israel to go in and start taking action against the people in the West Bank, specifically in Jenin. This is a shameful position. This is another proof that the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank does not represent the will of the Palestinian people. They tried to justify the genocide of Israel by blaming the Palestinian resistance. Even during the genocide in Gaza, they tried to infiltrate the resistance disguised as aid workers through the Rafah crossing. Fortunately, the Palestinian resistance was aware. And in 2008, the Palestinian president himself, Abu Mazen, he was asking the Israelis to destroy Hamas. And now he's refusing any sort of unity to build a new future for the Palestinian people, for everyone to prosper. And he's insisting on only him controlling the Gaza Strip following an Israeli genocide. What kind of a shameful position is that coming from the Palestinian Authority? Do they not think that people can see? You already have a problem with the Israeli occupation and genocide forces. And the people who have any national or patriotic positions in the West Bank Authority, they need to apply pressure on the people making these decisions. And of course, the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, they have people. They must have people who have the interest of the Palestinians in their heart. However, they clearly don't have any power or say when it comes to the decisions being made. And the proof that such people exist is the fact that, well, they had confrontations with Israelis. Several of the forces of the West Bank were killed in clashes with Israel. Some of them refused to have this operation in Jenin that the Palestinian Authority was conducting. However, clearly the bigger decisions are in the hands of people who don't have the Palestinian people's best interest in their hearts. They only have an agenda to serve Israel in the West Bank in the most crucial time of the Palestinian people, when they're trying to rebuild Gaza and move on from this genocide and continue with the hope for the Palestinian state and the liberation and the historical and contemporary rights of the Palestinian people. Which leads me to Gaza. In Gaza, things are moving very quickly. The ceasefire entered its fourth day, and record numbers of aid trucks are going into the Gaza Strip. Of course, tens of thousands of aid trucks must go in, and people have a lot of things that they need. 2,400 since the beginning of the ceasefire, according to UN reports, and people are seen building back some of their homes or parts of their homes in multiple parts of Gaza, because the rebuilding of all of the Gaza Strip would take a long time, and people need temporary measures. Some of these temporary measures would be in the form of new better condition tents or caravans for people to live in while the rebuilding takes place at a later stage during the ceasefire phases. But people who are going back to their homes and don't have anything to support themselves with are seen trying to take down the rubble, crush the destruction, make some cement, fix a couple of things here and there, make do with whatever they have. And the Palestinians are finding more and more bodies, but also more lies are being exposed when it comes to Gaza. This is one of the lies. Palestinian commander called Hussein Fayyad, who is the leader of the Al-Qassam Brigades battalion in Beit Hanun, reappears in Gaza after Israel declared him dead over a year ago. They said, we killed him. Beit Hanun is the most northern part of the Gaza Strip. And Israel said, we killed this man. Here, he's showing back up again, saying that, no, proving that no one really killed him. What did he say? He discussed the war and the losses, emphasizing the failure of Israel to achieve its declared objectives. If the strong do not win, they are defeated. And if the weak are not defeated, they are victorious. Because many people are saying, look at the destruction. How can you say that, you won? What about the 50,000 people who died? Many people like to use this argument. Even people who support the argument of World War II and the Allies having 50 million killed to stop Hitler. Why the double standards? Have the same standards, have the same argument when you want to apply it with the Palestinians. Was it worth it to sacrifice 50 million just so that Hitler won't have his way in Europe? Very important question. Why do you justify it on the Palestinians? Why do you justify a regime worse than the Nazi regime in Palestine in the form of Israel? So this is another lie coming from Israel. And what's notable here is the fact that some of these Palestinian resistance fighters and leaders are roaming freely in Gaza. This could be a part of the agreement that the Palestinian resistance had with Israel. Firstly, they were seen armed with the Israeli prisoners of war, but they were also seen armed in other parts of Gaza. The armed wing of all of the resistance movements. The police force is now deploying back again. And the Palestinian side, they have plans to rebuild Gaza. One of these plans was discussed by Mahmoud al-Mirdawi, who was a senior Hamas leader. He declared a new operation called the Flood of Loyalty. He said, now it's time for healing the wounds, uniting the people, providing the relief, and particularly rebuilding and focusing on the Palestinian rights, focusing on mechanisms to have Gaza being rebuilt the day after. And he also pointed out that already in Gaza, many steps are being taken towards that way. And it wasn't only him, there was another committee. Well, it's a union of the Gaza municipalities who had a meeting to talk about the rebuilding of Gaza. They called it the Gaza Phoenix Framework for Reconstruction and Sustainable Development, an initiative to confront the massive destruction caused by Israel. And it aims to address the effects of the war that caused massive losses in lives, infrastructure, and basic services, and to develop a comprehensive plan that combines emergency interventions and strategic plannings to achieve sustainable development, building a more resilient and sustainable future for the Palestinian people, and also focusing on the fact that they reject regarding Gaza as an empty land, stressing the importance of preserving the historical and cultural identity of the Strip during the reconstruction operations, because Israel, they targeted many historic places inside of Gaza, whether it's mosques, churches, historical buildings, apart from the destruction when it comes to the civilian side, like destroying all universities, all schools, all of the homes in Gaza, hospitals, civil services, ambulance, everything they destroy. So they're also focusing on having this identity of Gaza when they rebuild the Gaza Strip. Following thing that I wanted to talk to you about is more evidence coming about some of these tech giants helping Israel when it comes to genocide. And now more reports about Google when it comes to the genocide. Google facilitated AI tools for Israeli military during the war in Gaza, according to a report. There were other companies involved as well. One of the named companies was Amazon too. But this project that Google helped Israel with, it's an AI project that Google said they do not share with intelligence agencies and militaries. However, this report that was published clearly shows that no, Google actually helped Israel, and they have an agreement with Israel to help them with that. So it wasn't only countries that helped Israel when it comes to espionage and information, let alone, of course, arming them as well. It's tech giants too. And this is something very concerning. Now, we have seen many things that are concerning when it comes to social media in the past 15 months. People saw how much of a banning or shadow banning there is on social media when it comes to criticizing Israel and supporting the Palestinian people, which is in essence supporting human rights and speaking against genocide and the infanticide and destruction and war crimes that have been happening in Gaza by the terrorist state of Israel. Now you have confirmations that these things were planned by some of these tech giants and some social media outlets too. And the final thing that I wanted to talk to you about is the unprecedented coordination between Ansarullah in Yemen and the Palestinian resistance. The Yemeni front has been active up until the last second, side by side with the Palestinian resistance. It even reached a level where they continued to say that we will monitor the ceasefire to make sure there are no breaches. Ansarullah in Yemen were offered billions. They were offered global recognition. They were offered everything that they need just to stop the attacks on Israel, stop these attacks in the Red Sea. When they were one of very few countries targeting Israel and supporting the Palestinian people physically, in a very lawful and much needed and moral act, having an embargo on a country committing war crimes. This is something that all of the world's countries should have done against the genocide entity. Now they confirmed that in coordination with Hamas, they released the Galaxy crew. They took control of the Galaxy leadership, and they said this is in coordination with Hamas. If Hamas say we can release them, we will release them. If not, then we won't release them. And clearly they coordinated with the Palestinian resistance up until the last second. Now that we have a ceasefire, they decided to release the crew. This is something very, very symbolic, and this is something that applies pressure on Israel and the genocide cartel as well. Why? Because Israel knows if they breach a ceasefire with Gaza, they're going to have to deal with external measures as well. They've had this temporary ceasefire with Lebanon that's due to, end the temporary ceasefire. The 60 days should end in approximately 4 days, and we're expected to reach a permanent ceasefire. However, Israel made several concerning statements that they plan to remain in Lebanon, although Hezbollah warned them from that, saying that the 61st day will be different than the 60th day if they still remain in Lebanon. But Ansarullah, they haven't stopped. They were always open. And Israel definitely considers that, and it applies pressure on Israel to continue and adhere to the ceasefire agreement and move on with phases 2 and 3 as well. This is something very important. And now the fact that they released this crew at this time where we do have a ceasefire with Israel, between Israel and Gaza, this indicates how coordinated they are with the Palestinian resistance, and that will be something that Israel will have to consider in every single stage of the ceasefire if they decide to breach the ceasefire at any point.